and this will be a business heavy one. Yay. So welcome everybody to the 100th or 1000th edition of the Yamhill Leadership Roundtable, the Friday edition. And today we have Shannon Buckmaster from the Chehalis Valley Chamber of Commerce, Casey Kula, Yamhill County Commissioner, Abhisha Stone from SEDCOR, Mayor Michael Keat from Amity. We have Joya Gudrum from the McMinnville Chamber of Commerce. We have Mayor Scott Hill from the City of McMinnville. And we have Scott Cooper from McMinnville Economic Development Partnership. And we've got Mike here just hanging out. And I don't want to call too much attention to him because he likes to stay out of the way. So let's get started. I provided some opportunities for conversation and comments, but I would love to start with our business leaders here. What would you like to tell the people of your community, especially businesses? And let's go with Shannon Buckmaster to begin. Thank you, by the way, for hosting us today.
Oh, you're welcome for hosting. And actually, I would say the only real update I have is the update that I would probably share with Joya Gudrum from the McMinnville Area Chamber of Commerce and Abhisha Stone of SEDCOR is that, and it was what I also spoke to on Tuesday, that we are collectively combining our resources to start thinking about long-term solutions for our businesses, moving out of crisis response and into this sense of sustainable, logical support for our businesses, and having a conversation based on the feedback that we received. And kudos to Abhisha for collecting all this data all along the way, because she knew we would need it at some point. But even when we went through the county emergency relief grant process, we were capturing from our businesses, what does it look like for you to survive? First of all, how much money do you need? But what are the other challenges associated with that money? Is it childcare? Is it PPE? Is it reformatting your business practices? Is it access to broadband, or transitioning your communication process, or your access to digital content? So all of those questions. So we are in the process of creating a simple, very simple, approachable outreach to our businesses to confirm that we're moving in the right direction, so that as people who are thinking in terms of policy, we don't create a solution that doesn't match the need. But that's a waste of time for everyone. And so as soon as we can confirm with our businesses that we are looking at solutions to the problems that you actually want solved, then we'll start to release education, training opportunities, resources, and who knows, maybe even some money to help our businesses get through the next 18 to 24 months. So we're really wanting to move away from the week by week survivalist mentality, this minimalist mentality, and get into a place where we understand business differently. I know I used this analogy earlier on as we were facing the pandemic and economic crisis, but we can do things well even if they look different than what we had ever known. And if you look at how we traveled prior to September 11th, travel was very different, right? You could go to the airport, you could walk with your friend or your loved one right up to the gate, you could sit with them until they got on the plane. The only time you needed security in the boarding ticket was actually when you were going down the tarmac to get onto the airplane. And now we have security lines, we have TSA, we plan for extra time when we go to the airport. We know there are some things we can't keep in our luggage, and we're still good. We were still able to move forward. And so if you take that same paradigm or that same lens to put over the rest of it, we're going to try to figure out as a team what it's like to do business sustainably with a different culture, different requirements, as well, starting with a region. And maybe we can help regions who are watching us do this really important work. But we're simply ready to figure out the new way that we get back to business. That's what I got.
That's awesome. Do we have questions for Shannon, or like shout outs of here, or you got a couple of mayor high fives from that one?
Yeah, thank you. And this is a team sport, right? I'm one small voice, Joy is another voice, strong voice. Abhisha is a huge partner. And so you see all of our economic development partners coming together to answer questions we don't have answers for yet, but we're working really hard on behalf of business. So I would love to hear Abhisha or Joya pitch in. And Scott Cooper, you're also doing really, really amazing work.
And I'll just real quickly just share a couple of other things. Yes, from a business perspective, I support exactly what you're saying, Shannon. And what needs to happen. But in reality, it goes to government too. I mean, I think every single day we are trying to fine tune what works and how we're going to be doing things a little differently. I don't think there's a day that goes by that we're not on calls where we're sharing ideas. I mean, this morning we happened to be on the LOC call and some things happening there. And, they were talking about schools and they were talking about sports, and everything is in a state of flux. And to have that half full approach, Shannon, I think is what we need to do, because we are resourceful. We will win this thing out. And so I appreciate just that attitude and being an advocate for let's just get in and get it done.
Yes, thank you. And I must say I appreciate the emphasis on we don't need to have a minimalist approach. We need to be thinking, on the farm at least, we think about things from an abundant approach. So it's how we roll. Other comments for Shannon? All right, thank you very much. More to come, right? Abhishek, what would you like to tell people in the community today?
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, that's a great start, Shannon, to get this conversation kicked off. And I know that was one of the topics for discussion. So yeah, really, we are at a pivot, right? Doing the work that we do as C6 membership-based organizations that support businesses. In the beginning, it was all about just trying to keep up with all this changing regulation, the realities of this world flipped on its head, trying to be an immediate resource and conduit to this information, a translator of information regulation that was changing hourly. And now we're saying, okay, that kind of the urgency and craziness of that has died off a little. And now this, you can feel it. You can feel it in the air. It's the energy of pivot. It's the energy of shift. And our businesses need something different from us than they've ever needed before. And the work that the organizations like MEDP, McMinnville Chamber, Chehalis Valley Chamber of Commerce, and SEDCOR do is more important right now than it's probably ever been, at least in any of our lifetimes. And because of that, and because of the fact that none of the funding that's come through the federal sources or the state sources are available to us to prop up our own businesses, we are now working together to put together projects and programs that support the businesses the way that they need support, and then to market those efforts toward potential funding opportunities. So I have been working with the team on the call here, the folks I just named. I've also been working at a regional level with some partners, Jason Schneider out of Marion County. He's the partner I worked with to put together our regional ask for business grant funds. We're starting to draft a program of what that might look like. And it'll be several programs based on the needs of our specific businesses. But I'm really excited about that work. I'm excited about the energy that this team has on that work. And it's fun to work with really brilliant people who are very devoted to the work that they do. So more of that will come. This speaks also to the EDA list. And Commissioner Kula, I know that you put that on the list for discussion. So for a little bit of background, and you might be able to help me out with this, there once was a time when we had a needs and issues list in our region, and that was compiled by organizations like ours and the various jurisdictions to keep in front of EDA and other funding sources projects that the region had around economic development and redevelopment, especially after the spotted owl related issues in the timber industry. That was a very successful approach in making sure that the region understood projects that folks were looking to execute, to keep everyone organized, to help with prioritization. And as funding waned out of those programs, that list eventually stopped getting populated. So our regional solutions team, Jody Christensen for our area, has worked with other folks to put together this new list. And it's we're referring to it as an EDA funding list. But I believe that it will continue to be dynamic. It will continue to be populated with projects in our region. So we're looking at things such as next phase of bypass, very large infrastructure sort of projects, to things like business support, various other sorts. sorts of COVID-related and non-COVID-related economic development and capacity expansion sort of projects. The deadline for populating this list, the initial deadline, because again, I said it'll be dynamic, is the 31st of this month. And then we'll continue to populate as more projects get highlighted. We are potentially looking at a project for the City of Newburgh's Workforce Housing Consortium and those sorts of things. So more to come on that. I'm giving very much preliminary information, but this is how we start getting creative and thinking, and that's what we need right now. I also wanted to share that I know the Board of Commissioners is also working on a list, and we'll be meeting on Monday to discuss that, and I'm excited to see what comes out of that. We've had a lot of very active business members who are looking to make change. I mean, real change at a federal policy level. And one of those conversations is around onshoring the manufacturing of PPE. So there has been some legislation that's been proposed by some senators out kind of east and southern parts of our state around supporting locally made PPE and onshoring more of that activity and supporting businesses that are currently doing that work. And we have some really strong voices in our region specifically talking about that, business owners, manufacturers of PPE. So SEDCOR has recently stood up a roundtable of these manufacturers to bring their collective voice together to help pursue policy change where it needs to be had, and to make sure that our industry partners are just having a voice in this conversation. I also wanted to share, I mentioned the work that we had done at a regional level to get some funding for business direct grant programs. I've shared with you as along the way, we have made 4 asks in total, 3 of them to the state of Oregon, and we just found out that our last ask to the state of Oregon was successful. And we will receive over $680,000 for our region for another round of grants that will be stood up by Willamette Workforce Partnership, which means that our total success in this regional ask is over $1 million now. So I want to thank all of you for your support, and again, thank the county for standing up an initial program, which allowed us to have funds to leverage. The City of Newburgh stood up a program early, which again allowed our region to have funds to leverage. McMinnville has been working very hard to stand up a program and has successfully achieved some funding for their program. And all of those efforts have helped us to be able to get this funding. So thank you to everybody that's done that. Lastly, I wanted to share, I try to give a little bit of business direct feedback. So yesterday I was able to meet with some growers in our region and throughout the state to get some feedback for you all about what their specific industries look like. I'm hearing that the grass seed industry and the nursery and ornamentals industry are very strong, both with international exports and with domestic sales. And what they're saying is, you know, people are staying home and they're investing in their lawns, basically, right? Their yards and home projects. I know I have, so I told them all, you're welcome. I have bought both grass seed and ornamental plants, and my yard looks much better, so thank you. But really strong industries and lots of good things to report. The hops industry is also reporting so far good growing year and projecting a good sales year. We also heard from some of our Eastern Oregon cattle ranchers as a little bit more element of concern. They have hundreds of heads sitting in feedlots that cannot get processed. So it is not the raw materials supply domestically that's an issue, it's processing backups. They're saying that their processing partners are citing issues with getting staff. One of those concerns is that they're having a hard time pulling people back to work with a high level of income related to unemployment. They also have dealt with a few small outbreaks that have caused them to have to quarantine employees. And so there's a 14-day quarantine, and that's left them additionally shorthanded. With measures regarding distancing in production floors, they've had some production line slowdowns, but mostly this is a staff-related issue. We also heard from our cherry grower partners on both sides of the river in Washington and Oregon, out in the Hood River area. And some of those organizations are managing 100% farm worker housing and have said that they've been very successful in managing the housing itself and doing the distancing requirements and transportation. And though it's been a burden, it's been successful. Where they've struggled the most is supporting their employees in social distancing and their off hours within that housing. So, kind of social events and dinners and things like that after hours. So they've had to implement very, very strict requirements, like basically 24/7 mask wearing requirements whenever you're on the property. And that has been their biggest difficulty in trying to help keep people safe. And I know that was a lot. I think that's it for me. I'm happy to answer questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Avisha. And I think it's especially good with the details you provided to help people in the community understand what PsychCorps does in our area, because you work with businesses, but the greater community may never understand or see. So thank you for sharing that. Joya looks like has a question.
I do. So the applications for the Business Oregon grant that Willamette Workforce Partnership was managing, for lack of a better word, do you know how many applications have come in?
I don't. They just closed it yesterday. And
did it close yesterday? Okay.
I haven't gotten those numbers yet. It was open the 21st through the 23rd. Right. They were a little bit concerned initially about getting enough applicants because these funds are not available to people that had already received any CARES Act funding. So I do want to make another comment that out of this round 3 funds, Business Oregon actually had more money because of work that the e-board did to get additional funding into their hands. And I want to say that our e-board partners, I wish they were on the call today, like Representative Gomberg, had been advocating to loosen some of those regulations. And I believe that the funding coming through the e-board, from the e-board through Business Oregon for round 3 funding, so that 680,000 plus that we just received, do not have that restriction on it. So again, we might have had a business who applied for EIDL early on thinking they were applying for $10,000. Then EIDL changed its regulation or its rules. Then this business ended up getting $2,000, not knowing they were getting the money until it was automatically deposited in their account. And that made them ineligible for any of these other grant programs coming from the state, which may have made them eligible for closer to $25,000. So the fact that folks received a very minimal amount of money, in some cases in advance, made them ineligible for any of these other programs. And that has been a huge hurdle. So the work that the e-board did to loosen that for this last round is extremely helpful. Yeah, so I'll let you know when that next one gets stood up. We don't have timing on that yet.
Okay, perfect. That was my question, but it looks like Shannon Buckmaster has unmuted herself.
Yeah, so Avisha, you did remind me, just as we're watching employment trends, that we did get our June numbers from the Unemployment Department or the Department of Employment. And just to briefly summarize, because I'm proud I read the report, Yamhill County's unemployment rate is at 9.7%, and it was at 13.2%. So we had significant gains as a county. Statewide, we're at 11.2%, down from 14.3% unemployment. So we saw gains across the state, but we saw a significant gain as a county. We were actually, I think I read that Yamhill County had the highest gain in employment for the state. So that was good news for all of us. Losses, we saw manufacturing actually had almost a 1% drop, 0.9%. And then private education actually had a 22.7% drop, which shows again how important it is for us to understand education and support our educational partners, because that's going to be a more relevant conversation for the next 6 weeks as we prepare to start our school years. Leisure and hospitality was up 5.5%. Retail was up 1.8%. Leisure and hospitality is especially important to think about in the C6 component, because leisure and destination marketing organizations for our county, that's Taste Newburgh, Visit McMinnville, and in some cases, chambers. Part of my chamber budget is all reliant on the taxes that other people pay when they come to stay in our hotels. So that's the TLT tax, is a tax that our residents don't pay. The people who come visit pay that tax for us. And that generates significant revenue, not just for those organizations, but for our cities as well. The city of Newburgh and the city of McMinnville get significant revenue from TLT. So if we're watching those employment rates increase, that shows that we might have modest gains in our financial forecast for the upcoming year. That's all.
Yeah, that's some good details. Thank you very much. And it's hopeful trends for especially the business organizations that are here. And Abhisha, I just want to note that you gave credit to the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners for an immediate relief grant program, but let the record show that Abhisha is the one who put it together and presented it to us. And then other people used it too, but I just want to acknowledge that she put a lot of work into that really, really quickly, even though it took a while because of the mechanisms of government and bureaucracy to actually get it stood up and paid out to people. But we do, along the lines of the immediate relief grants, we submitted for reimbursement through the CARES Act funding that's sitting at the state. And my hope is that when we get that reimbursement, because we did it without an expectation of reimbursement, my hope is that we can actually use that money to do another round. Because there's a lot of people, it was a lottery system, so there were a lot of people who are still either in urgent need or in need of that for their businesses. So, any other questions or comments for Abhisha? All right, great. I'm going to move on to Joya Gudrum from the McMiddle Chamber of Commerce. What would you like to tell people in the community today?
All righty. Hey, nice to be here. Thank you. Abhisha, you are amazing. And Shannon, you as well. It has been such a pleasure working with you over the last few months on these things. And of course, Scott and I are on a completely separate group called the Stable Table here in Mac. And we have a great time talking about how we're going to help our community. So it's so nice to see how these different organizations have really come together to work on specific programs and opportunities to really support our business community, which ultimately supports our community. So I'm grateful I get to participate in that. A couple of things, I'm going to talk about Lemonade Day. April 15th, I can't wait. Go out and support those kids. We still have about 30 bags, and I would love to see all of these lemonade bags go out to these kids. There's great information in there. There's fun things to learn and lots of great little giveaways that every single one of our sponsors has put into the bags. So please call the chamber and let us know you'd like to come by and pick up a Lemonade Day bag for your kids. And we'll make sure we hold them aside for you. We have been doing some webinars on a business support series, and we're looking at some other ideas. If businesses out there have an idea about a webinar that they would like to talk about, or an idea that they have, or something they'd like to learn, I'm willing to listen to that idea. So that offer is out there. We do still have masks and face shields that were generously given to us by the county health department. So thank you. And so we're handing those out as well. So please call the chamber, 503-472-6196 if you need a face mask or a shield for your business and your employees. Cascade Employers Association sent out a survey that they did, and it was all on impact of COVID to business. And I forwarded it to both Shannon and Abhisha because I think that might help us as we're looking at where our business is right now and what do they need on a wider platform than just our local community. I don't know if you all heard, but the forgivable portion of the EIDL loans is gone. So businesses that had applied, there was an opportunity to apply for more EIDL money, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Fund through the SBA. You can still apply for money, but it is not forgivable. So that just happened. I think the last of the money ran out on the 11th of July. And there is a fourth COVID bill that is being discussed, and my sources tell me that next week we might be hearing from Senator McConnell about where they're going. They are in talks with the House and the Senate are talking, and hopefully we'll have something to share with that. There's a lot of speculation about what that bill could look like, but it won't be done until it's done. and they've all agreed on everything. And like my two compadres here, the ladies, I also am looking at what's next. That's really what we're talking about. What is next? What's the next thing we have to do? And it's hard to look down the road because who knows what the heck's going to happen next. But at least to have some plans in place. And lastly, we are looking at our Leadership MAC program for next year and how we're going to run that. So we've got some ideas, but we have not completely made a decision about our Leadership MAC program as to how we're going to run it, but stay tuned. So we'll keep you posted on that as well. I appreciate being in on these meetings. I'm sorry I miss them every once in a while because of other things going on, but it's always, always a pleasure to see everyone on this call. And I love our community and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
I hit the wrong buttons, Joya, so I made everybody small and they needed to make us big again. So sorry about that. Okay, thank you very much. It's really good to know what's happening for people in the community, what's happening on the business front, and how and where they can gain resources. We need as many of the businesses as we can to come through this in some form. And then as for policymakers, and elected officials, we need to know what they need as they ramp back up or get into a new normal. So it's really important to have your voices here. Thank you. I'm going to go to Scott Cooper and are there questions for Joya or comments? All right, I'm going to go to Scott Cooper from McMinnville Economic Development Partnership. What would you like to tell people in the community today?
Good afternoon. Yeah, I just want to echo, I guess, and briefly, even though I'm not always here, I do always watch the replay of these meetings. And hearing last week Shannon's voice on moving forward and what we're going to do and the importance of that is truly critical. Conversations with manufacturers and small businesses alike, PPP funds are running out. And although those numbers that Shannon gave were slightly less awful, it's still a concern moving forward that those numbers will rise. As PPP funds runs out, businesses are running 60%. And when those funds start to run out, they've got hard questions that they've got to face: layoffs, furloughs, what do they do? And how do they best handle that moving forward are going to be key. We've got to get funds, we've got to get opportunities into their hands so they can salvage not only their employees, but their businesses. So that is key moving forward in the coming months. EDA applications was also mentioned. We're working with the city on several different ideas and opportunities to present multiple options for the community and to best benefit our business community and those things moving forward. Otherwise, manufacturing is hiring. That seems to be true throughout the region. I know just here in McMinnville, we've got anything from general labor to engineers that are needed. So it kind of covers the full span of people and positions that are needed. So that is encouraging, and that's good to see. But and the last thing I was going to mention, but I dare not steal the thunder from Mayor Hill and on the Business Oregon funding. I will let him talk about that. But good news. So that's it. Thank you very much, and good to be back.
Great, thank you very much, Scott. Scott Cooper, not Scott Hill. Yes, thank you. One thing that I should mention is that the county just announced that, or learned that they received a significant, I think it's $700,000 COVID-related grant for our public safety offices and departments. So again, another very positive move forward in covering the costs of the work we're doing and in covering the costs of pivoting to new ways of doing things as well. So very, very glad to hear that. Are there questions for Scott Cooper before we move on to Mayor Hill so that he can grab that thunder? Okay, thank you very much. Mayor Hill, what would you like to tell people in the community? It sounds like there's a lot to talk about. And if you would, I would welcome you to do an update on what you heard on your LOC call, the League of Oregon Cities call. unless
Okay.
you want to hand that off to Mayor Cape.
Well, we can split that possibly.
Okay, he
Says
says
no.
this.
I think the most important news is late yesterday we learned that we did receive $100,000 from Business Oregon for emergency business assistance, which means that we need to match that. So we have $200,000 in grants that are going to be going out in the next 2 months for assistance, and we're going to specifically be looking at those are going to be going to minorities, women in business types of assistance. So we're real excited about that. And our stable table, Joya and Scott Cooper and MIP and the city are working on that. So that's a great win. I know we've been holding off because we wanted to see us being able to match those monies. We also think that we're going to be able to get a CRF reimbursement for our 100,000, which means that we still have our 100,000, which we're still working with MISO. And if we're able to put a MISO loan package together, that could be significant dollars, upwards of $500,000 to assist businesses in McMinnville. What a win for the community. A lot of hard work that's been put into that. So again, more to come. It's fairly breaking news as we just received that information last night. I think the other thing that I would like to share is COVID related. I had an opportunity to meet with the hospital on Wednesday, and Lori just indicated that the hospital is in great shape. That they've only had 4 COVID hospitalizations in the 5 months that COVID's been in existence or that we've known about it. And those are individuals that have been positive that have had to stay in the hospital. She'd indicated that if anyone has the COVID virus, that they are put into isolation at the hospitals to protect employees, to protect anyone that would be at the hospital. She shared with me that, the flu season is upcoming. And we're going to see a barrage of flu shot opportunities starting in August, and that's a bit early. And you're going to have to weigh that out in your mind, she said, because in reality, the flu season doesn't start till October usually and goes through May. Last year, it was even a later start to the end of December. And if you get your inoculation early, it may not be in effect when the flu season comes if it's in December. But again, we talked a little bit about that and the availability. And as you get closer to the end of the year, the vaccines are harder and harder to get. And so she wanted to share a little bit that's just maybe going to complicate the COVID situation, work, and all of those types of things. I wanted to do an update because Dave from the Downtown Association updated us yesterday on our McMinnville leadership call and I call it Downtown Dine program is working very well. I think we're in our going into our 4th week now. We have 21 restaurants that are open, and every week it is getting better. More people are coming. I think the thing that I would share is that it's a safe environment where we're distancing. The workers are wearing protective coverings and gloves. And food is being served. It's helping to revitalize the downtown area. Businesses are now saying, do I open and stay open during that time? Because there's an influx of people coming in and we're seeing more business happening downtown. It was really interesting. Dave said that he made arrangements with Recology to put receptacles outside to gather garbage. And he says, when he came down on Monday, the downtown was cleaner than it has ever been before, because they sometimes pay to have people clean that up down there. And so people are becoming responsible. So I wanted to do an update on that. Two very last things that I would have is that on Wednesday night, we had a council work session, and we talked on two different items. We went 2.5 hours in our discussions then, but we talked about UGB, and for business and for citizens of McMinnville, that's a big topic. You may not understand all the ramifications of it, but what it does is when we don't have the surplus and the supply of land, then land prices go up, housing prices go up, business prices go up, and we've been working 20 years on this. And so basically what we've done is we've taken the last court rendering of that was given to us in 2013. And so we're going to remand and go back and resurrect that a bit. And I'll tell you, we're on a very fast process. We heard all of the underlying things that we need to overcome to be able to move forward in our UGB. And part of that would be, at a certain point, we're going to have a joint session with the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners, because it's a determination that we need to do. But I can tell you right now that late September, we will have our UGB maps, the draft completed. We'll have all the other documents by late October. We'll meet with the Board of Commissioners in November and December, and we hope to be able to deliver back to LCDC by the end of the year, which then moves us down the path that we need to go. One last thing, then we also spent a good hour and a half on our diversity, equity, and inclusion. We brought our year-and-a-half inclusion resolution out, and we're updating that. And we want to have a good community dialogue. Over the last 3 weeks and a month, we've seen a lot of things come to light when it comes to diversity, race, inclusion, equity, and we want to make sure that we are on top of that, and our documents that we would support would be current. And so we're starting that process. Like I said, we had a very healthy discussion on Wednesday night. And closing would be LOC this morning. I think the most important thing that was discussed this morning was we had the director of the Oregon State Education on the call this morning that talked about that, even though from an educational standpoint, and we've talked about this on this call, is that each district is responsible for how they're going to enact coming back to school. And the director of education shared the rationale behind that and some of the more intricate pieces of those processes. The big thing is, I think we're going to hear some direction on sports. I think we're going to hear some direction in the near future on some guidances that the governor may give on coming back to school and what that means, which includes taking a look at our teachers, looking at our staff, and looking at our students, and looking at parents. And so I would suggest that anyone that would be interested could go and listen to the playback of that call. But that was the biggest takeaway for me on the call this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that Joya has 2 questions. And I would like to note that I think that the guidance is supposed to come out either Monday or Tuesday on sports and more school guidance. But Joya.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, for your update. I appreciate all that you're doing. I have 2 questions. On the MISO funds, those grants, the MISO program, would some of that be forgivable?
My understanding is, Scott, you may join in because you've been on some of those talks, but my understanding is going with MISO is what we're going to as a company, and we're going to give them $100,000, and then they are going to put together a program at a reasonable cost. So it's not a grant, it's a loan program that has a drawn out payment schedule to help people continue and move forward. And any monies that we put in, we lose, because basically what we're doing is we're building a non-compliance or a fund to take care of any delinquencies and
loss, right? Yeah, a loss. Yeah, okay. Yeah. A loss reserve. That's what it's
Absolutely.
called, right? Okay,
Absolutely.
got it. Okay, second question. I've had a lot of people ask me this question. 3rd Street. Are we ever going to close 3rd Street completely?
I'll tell you.
I'm not on either side of the fence on this. Everybody keeps asking me about it, and I keep saying, I don't know. So
Are you talking about permanently closing it?
yes.
Or we in all the time I've been in city government, which now is coming up to 16 years, closing downtown has never been a topic that has received any traction whatsoever. Now, we've talked about one-way traffic. We've talked about ways of changing parking and those types of things. And especially at this point, as we're looking at the downtown project, closing down 3rd Street downtown has not been a topic that's ever been brought out.
Okay, thank you. And it is exciting to see, all that's happening with this whole 3rd Street closure plan on the weekends. Do you see that going through August and maybe into the fall as well? Because wasn't it only going to be July?
I think that we've had enough success that within the next week we will be taking a look. But I think there's good indication that it'll go through the good weather. Now, after the good weather, then it doesn't make sense, because who wants to eat with their umbrella overhead? But I think that, yes, as long as the good weather and we feel like we're comfortable and we're doing what we need to do to support the governor's safety pieces, that would be important.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. I have to go. Thank you so much, everybody. Great to see you.
Thank you, Joya.
Stay well.
And Scott Cooper unmuted himself for a moment, so I just want to check in. Scott, did you have anything you wanted to add? You got it. Okay, she got it.
Mayor.
I wanted to be the one to note that the first time I ever interacted with Joya was when we were on different sides, as it were, of the issue of moving the city, the county government out of downtown or not. Now we're at a place where we're talking about what kind of a building can we build in the downtown core that frees up more space in the downtown for businesses to relocate into downtown while still maintaining that solid core of lots of people. So things change, right? And I think everybody at the county is excited and glad for 3rd Street with some version of closure on the weekend. So, all right. Thank you, Mayor Hill. Mayor Cape, what would you like to tell people today?
Thank you. And I want to first start off by saying thank you to Shannon, starting us off on a positive note. Because I would say being in the education side of it, we kind of feel like we got the wind sucked out of our sails this week with the guidance for reopening for schools and what was written there. So I guess I'll start with that piece of it, the education side of it. And there's a couple really difficult components for schools to be able to move forward with the new guidance. And the first one is the cohorting requirements. And that's a big piece to allow schools to be able to reopen, is that students would be in their own separate cohort and separated from other groups so that they could do the contact tracing and limit the infections. The new guidance now states that cohort can have a maximum a student in that cohort can have a maximum of 100 contacts per week, contacts with other individuals. So to start off with, your cohort alone is going to have, on average, at least 30 other students, plus teachers and aides and whatnot. So probably pretty easy to calculate 35 just in that classroom. And then, for example, if at least one student in that cohort rides the bus, you're probably looking at another 25 to 30 contacts. So right there alone, just those two pieces gets you, more than half, probably close to 60 of those 100 contacts. And so I think in elementary schools, it might be a little bit more doable. I say a little bit because it is just that. But certainly when you start talking about the high school classes and the elective options in particular, it's easy for, here in Salem anyway, some of our band classes, band and orchestra and choir, to easily number up into the 50s or even 100. So you could have a big orchestra class, and right there is your 100 contacts. And but that's just one class, and then they're going to have probably 8 classes. So and then what about the teachers too? Because they're going to be a part of that cohort, but they're only going to be limited to 100 contacts, but they're going to go from one classroom to another classroom to another classroom. And each of those classrooms are going to have, again, 30 kids in them, and they're going to go to like 6 to 8 of those. So, and that's on the A day. And then on B day, there's going to be another 6 to 8. So extremely difficult requirements to be able to move forward with that hybrid option that a lot of schools are looking at. So I think some of the smaller districts might be able to get away with that. I think maybe, like I said, there's a chance maybe some of the elementary schools can do that, but it's going to be interesting on my part to see how the schools, at least in Salem Kaiser, move forward with that. So the other extremely difficult part of that is I had a team meeting at 11 o'clock when the governor started her press conference, and I was like, I really wanted to listen to that because I figured there would be something to affect me in that. But I was in my meeting. By the time I get done with my meeting, she's done with her press conference, and that's when the Department of Ed released their new guidelines. And so literally, like 2 minutes before my meeting gets done, my boss emails me those new guidelines, and I see it pop up in my email. So I'm like, oh, great. I end my meeting, open up the new guidelines, and then as I start reading it, the farther and farther I go through that document, I'm like, everything we just did, I now have to redo. So that's the other extremely frustrating part, is it seems like every day we work really hard trying to get something done, and then we got to the next day go back and redo it. But that's the government side of it, and giving us plenty of opportunities to stay employed, I guess. So, so there's that part of it. There's some difficult stuff there to move forward. On the city side of it, I did want to address a couple things as well. The CARES Relief Fund monies that are now available. Amity did apply for that for the $50,000, so we're in that portal, so we get reimbursed for some good chunk of money, which is really good for us. The bad part of it, again, like I have been saying for a very long time, during a health crisis, water should be the #1 thing, and yet we're not providing funding for that. And Mike was kind enough to set up a meeting with an individual to help us get prepared for the CRF funds and the paperwork and what we could do. And so I joined him on that conference call, and I specifically asked why and who is not allowing us to provide assistance to homeowners with their water utility bills. And I appreciate the gentleman. He gave us the nice answer, and he even provided me with an email that describes it all. And the frustrating part is, apparently, and I was hoping we would have our state representatives and senators on the call today to hear this part, because it really sounds like it's centered around the Department of Administrative Services, which I think a large number of people in our state probably don't realize exactly what the folks do in that department, in DAS. But they are the ones, they're the they that is controlling the application of those funds. And I specifically said, I was on a conference call with the White House that had the deputy director of the Treasury Department. And he said on that conference call, yes, these funds can be used for water utility reimbursements. I've been on conference calls with elected officials that were a part of the state's group that came up with the distribution package, right, of those funds. And in that conference call, they said, yes, those funds can be used for water utility assistance. And I've been on this conference call where I've listened to members of the emergency board say, yes, we approve the spending of that package, and the money's coming to the cities. And the part that's just still so very frustrating to me is that the DAS personnel are looking at one, basically it's one paragraph in the frequently asked questions guidance. It's not even the actual writing of the CARES Relief Act funds. It's the frequently asked questions guidance. In one paragraph, it starts out saying that those funds can't be used to replace lost revenue. And so that's what they're getting hung up on. But the last sentence specifically says, yes, these funds can be used for utility assistance to help, and I forget the exact wording, so I don't want to get too hung up on that, but it says, yes, these funds can be used for utility assistance for individuals affected by the pandemic. And so but they're getting hung up on this sentence when this sentence down here says, yes, you can use it. And to me, that's just the extremely frustrating part of it. You have a lot of people that have worked really hard at all levels to address these things. And then you have a bureaucrat doing their job, and I'm sure working hard, but they get stuck on one sentence and they're not going to read the sentence below that. And so that's extremely frustrating to me. But the good news is Mike, who is on the call with us, he's come up with some ideas and some ways that we're going to be able to move forward and try and provide opportunities for the citizens of Amity to get access to some of those funds and provide some help to them. And our hope is that we can use that to help them get their utility bills paid if they haven't been able to do so. And there's some ideas there that they're going to be working forward, and they're going to be working on that, I believe, through the month of August, and with the hopes that we can start having some of that available for the public in September. So I know it's still a little ways away. We're working on that as fast as we can, but that's the good news is we finally do have some funds available for our citizens. So I'm looking forward to making that happen. So I've talked a lot. I'll kind of leave it at that unless anybody has any questions.
It looks like Mayor Hill has questions, which I was assuming he would.
Mike or Mayor, I would suggest that you have Mike reach out to Mac Water and Light and talk to John Dietz because that's a bigger organization and maybe can give you some insights into some of the things that we're being reimbursed for on the water and the electric side. I think more of it's on the electric side, but if we have any insights, John Dietz would be willing to give Mike some insights, definitely.
Well, Mike's listening on this call, so I'm sure he's writing that down. And if he's not, he is now, since I'm saying it. So.
Yeah, and Mike, if you need an introduction, just give me a call, and I'll make those introductions.
Sounds great. And I actually I've neglected. I'm supposed to invite John Dietz to join these calls too, and totally spaced. So somebody here needs to add him to the email list, and then I'll be like, oh, look, I added him. Okay, well, thank you, Mayor. Those are both two really big areas right now. And I connected you with YCAP while you were talking too, to see whether they have assistance funds as well for your ratepayers. We'll see.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Well, we're at 2:07, so let's try to do a wrap up. Are there any last thoughts? Okay, great. I was going to do a quick overview of a few things, since I rarely take the time to actually say anything of substance. The first thing I wanted to do is put out a really public thank you to the members of our public health staff. We all keep going with our lives in whatever altered form it's in, and they are the people who are doing the contact tracing and the phone calls and the emails all day and night to our hospitals and our care facilities and to sick people. And so I'm so grateful for their work that has enabled us all to keep doing some version of open. I know that for a lot of people, it's still a hard version, but we're out and about. In fact, I was with a friend on 3rd Street in McMinnville yesterday, and we remarked that we encountered each other early on after the shutdown part, and we both wondered, as denizens of downtown, would it ever look the same again, as it was completely deserted? And we realized, hey, we're both wearing masks, but everybody else just looks like normal. And that was really, really encouraging for us. So thanks to public health for doing that work that keeps us all in an open state. I wanted to address, I get a lot of comments on social media and emails and text messages that provide me with what people would call their science. They say, you have your science and I have my science. And I've thought a lot about this. I want to just put out there that my response lately to people when they share what is obviously not correct or accurate information is to try to go deep within myself and say, well, who am I trusting and why? And I realize it's, I really place a lot of emphasis on our state epidemiologist. And so he and his staff, Dr. Seidlinger, have all of the information for Oregon specific, and they have years of training that have prepared them for this. And so when I look at whether I'm going to trust somebody who is on YouTube and who put on scrubs for their photo shoot versus the head of our epidemiological work here in the state, I choose to simply trust the scientist who has been tasked with doing this for our state. So I had to struggle with it to figure out what I was feeling. The new state rules that start today, I want to pull up just so get it right. Effective today, we have face coverings required for ages 5 and up. Restaurants and bars must close at 10 p.m. regardless of phase the Erie County is in. Face coverings are now required when exercising indoors or outdoors if you can't physically distance. And the capacity limit for restaurants, gyms, and venues, so weddings, concert halls, churches, is reduced to 100 people indoors, and that includes staff. And then I wanted to note that I read, one of the things outside of my extracurricular activities is I read Science Magazine every week, which is the premier science peer-reviewed journal that's general science, so it's all of science. And this week there was a feature article called Not Open and Shut, which is a reference to how with school and looking at what are the safety issues with reopening schools in the middle of a pandemic, it's not totally clear that communities should open, and it's not totally clear that communities should close. And so I highly recommend that. You can just Google Science Magazine, not open and shut. And it takes you through a lot of the different cases. So what happens, the question is kind of answered, what happens when a teacher or a student gets coronavirus? Can school children transmit? Should school children wear masks? Do schools act as outbreak sources for their communities and vice versa? So a lot of really good information in there. And I encourage folks, especially parents who are wrestling with the issues, to take a look at what the studies show in other countries. Our daily number for today for Oregon is, I think, 369 new cases and 9 deaths. And I want to note that we continue, while we have lowered rates of hospitalizations in the state, we do continue to increase the number of deaths over time. And this is something that really, like all of our efforts here on this call and as individuals, is to keep that as low as possible. And so for me, that's a reminder to myself of what I need to be doing. But along those lines, the July 22nd, it's July 24th. Whoa, my door closed. The most recent projections from the state using the Institute for Disease Modeling software came out. And they provided, I had to read through it really closely to figure out what they were saying, but it's really the subtext of all the information in that projections is that we are in a liminal, a pivot moment, as Abhisha put it, but we're in a place where we could actually affect great change and reduce our transmissions by simply reducing our transmission rate now by 10%. And so that's a real small, like we can actually change the R naught value, so the rate of reproduction of the virus, to be negative, to be below 1, by reducing our transmission in the community by the things that we do or don't do by simply 10%, which is a really, really encouraging thing. It means that a small difference in each of our individual decisions in gatherings and how we wear masks and how we wash our hands can actually make a trend towards reducing cases, which will be very, very, very good as we approach fall and schools. So I just want to point that out there, that there's a strong possibility that we can get this under control, as opposed to feeling like we don't have control of it. So how encouraging, right? But with that, I will close us off by reminding people in the community that everybody who's here on the call is working for you. Reach out to us and we can help you with business, health stuff, your challenges, because we're here for you. And with that, I will see you on Tuesday. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.